bill in South Carolina would force consumers to pay a fee to access pornography from any computer purchased in the state. Now, should we be calling this a porn tax? And HTC is prepping a big announcement for January, but will Samsung delay launching the Galaxy S8 until later in the year? Those stories, plus we'll answer your viewer questions, so make sure you're charged and ready for the Pocketnow Weekly. This weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile. Smartphones, tablets, and wearables. It's all the stuff you wished existed when you were a kid, and a 56K modem was all the deterrent you needed to stop you from downloading porn. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, senior editor at Pocketnow.com, blasting the signal from another rainy night in Southern California. We went the whole week without any inclement weather from podcast to podcast, and it's raining again outside, and I can hear sirens all over the place, and it's pretty freaky again. Californians, we are not good when moisture descends from the sky. And joined, as always, this week by plucky podcast producer Mr. Jules Wong, still out on location in a foreign land. How's it going out there, buddy boy?
It was a dark and stormy night, and I was writing in my logs about how other pirates in their ships can't get their crap together. Really, why are you doing this? You should be docked. Please.
Well, no. and again, I mean, you know, the obvious joke with some of the subject matter we have up tonight, you know, you're going to tell a story about pirates and that pirate booty, arg. No?
Pirate boot, what?
No.
Are we talking about piracy?
Well, in a way, we kind of are.
I mean, sort of, not really, but like...
We're going to save that for a later segment in the show.
I was thinking of just, you know, XXX, hot, sexy, girl boy time with the penetration and condoms. Wow.
That's not at all really what we're going to be discussing. But,
okay.
You know, before we jump into
on the screen, on your screen,
additional
coming to a screen new year
conversations of that sort, because thankfully we have a sponsor this week who I'm sure they absolutely loved that lead in to their business and service. Let's get this out of the way before we embarrass them any further. This week, we really want to thank Jamf Now. That's JAMF Now. And that's a cloud-based mobile device management solution for the iPads, iPhones, and Macs in your workplace, which makes device management accessible and affordable for everyone. Now, businesses can support their users without help from an IT department. Configure settings across all of your Apple devices quickly and consistently over the air, managing your devices by centrally deploying apps anytime from anywhere. Use Jamf Now to ensure the sensitive company information your employees access on their Apple devices remains secure. Enforce passcodes and encryption over the air, even remotely lock or wipe a device. See how easy it is to set up, manage, and secure your Apple devices anytime from anywhere. Manage your first 3 devices for free. Add more for just $2 a month per device, and you can create your free account today. They've got a special link for listeners of this podcast. That's jamf.com/pocketnow, jamf.com/pocketnow. And we thank them for supporting the Pocketnow Weekly.
Yeah, come on and slamp and welcome to the Jamf.
Heck yeah, buddy boy. Actually, you know what? There is something kind of cool to the notion of like if you're running a small business, especially here in Southern California, I've been noticing a lot of companies switching over to sort of tablet or smartphone based point of sale systems. And so, like you're a food truck, you're a small business, something like that. And you probably don't, you probably have like the neighbor kid who's your IT department. Something like that, I think could actually be kind of beneficial, because I know when I was working on government contracts, getting Department of Energy facilities up to date on security standards, but using consumer solutions was a really tough call. So having something like this, if you're running a business and you want to check out what you might need to deploy, some phones or some tablets out in the field, maybe check them out. Jamf.com/pocketnow. It could be a good fit for you and your small business solutions.
Yeah, it definitely would be great to manage all those phones that the carrier stores have.
Right. Well, again, I think they're not necessarily wrong in looking at iOS devices. I think
Yeah.
there have been a number of solutions. I see so many iPad point of sale systems out here. It's so crazy
Yeah.
to think that we went from cash registers to just consumer grade tablets, and that's what we're trafficking. Credit card information, personal information, shopping and loyalty, customer data, and all that stuff's just going through an iOS device, and that makes me a little squirrely. But if you're doing that, then look at Jamf, because apparently
I
they've got
mean,
all the solutions you need.
I mean, you're way past the days of just tossing out Coinbox and saying, "Well, you just have to put in exact change, no exceptions." Sorry, not sorry.
Have you ever worked like a fast food gig, or like a retail gig or anything like that?
No, I've not had to man
Oh,
the
okay.
cashier.
So because
Oh,
normally I was some sort of like shift manager or trainer. So I used to work at a little pizzeria in New Mexico. But every now and then I'd have to run a cash register, and it was crazy. In the couple years, this is like from the end of high school to the like my second year of college. Like it only took like 3 or 4 years to go from dumb cash registers that were just basically like free calculators. You could just do basic arithmetic on them, to like, I'll push the picture of the food and then it tells me how much money to give you back. And
oh
like
my
we would
God, the
we would
touch
have to like
screens,
calculate, well, not touch screens, just like literally big buttons that they would put pictures of food
buns of
on.
food.
And
Oh,
like
geez.
how quickly that happened, where you would have to. My wife also worked a cash register at a restaurant in college, and like we would have to do all that math in our heads. We would have to calculate sales tax in our heads, and by the time we were out of our second year of college, like all of that had been replaced with these point of sale systems that were basically like picture book. I'll push the button.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's better than actual calculators and like a tax machine, like a tax receipt kind of printing device that you use as
Right.
actual receipt printing paper.
Now,
Not
who is
really the
it?
way to
Was it
go.
was it Jeff Bezos that's saying he wants to make a grocery store where they don't even have cash registers or checkout
No, no,
lanes?
yeah, it was the Amazon thing, Amazon Go, I believe, and they only have one thing up in Seattle. And apparently, they just decided word of that concept spreading,
Mm-hmm.
2,000 markets or so, that got shut down. So, it
Uh,
was fun while it lasted, but we're going to have to see how quickly they learn from all this experimentation. But in the meantime, we're also experimenting with how we do a podcast, and we would
yeah,
love
we
for
are.
you to be part of the conversation, the
Well,
experiment
and
with
how
us.
might someone get involved with us to like join the conversation or contribute to the discussion of this podcast, Mr.
Well,
Juan?
all you have to do is sign up for Twitter. That's it. And then once you're done with that, it's pretty easy. Once that's done, you just track down the hashtag PN Weekly, the PN Weekly hashtag, and track what we're talking about as we're talking about it live. If you're catching the live podcast, we'll be able to quickly answer your questions and promote the discussion of what's going on. And if you just don't happen to be in that sort of jam, then you want to go into your email and type in podcast@pocketnow.com. Send us your queries, whatnot. We'd love to answer any of your longer form questions. And yeah, we appreciate any of your feedback.
And surprisingly, I don't know if you saw this one coming, but I put the word porn in the blog post of this podcast episode, and this has been maybe one of the most aggressively shared podcast blog posts that we've
Really?
ever produced for the
Really now?
Pocketnow Weekly.
Wait, hold on. I have to refresh this.
So
75 page views, 89 page views, a record.
hmm And already we've
Wow.
got a couple people using that PN Weekly hashtag, from Chamford Edges, who I absolutely love that Twitter handle. Shopping
Still
on
love it.
vacay while getting my weekly slice of PN Weekly is well worth it. Cheers. Cheers to you,
I
good
don't think
sir.
that's a healthy behavior since you should really be watching that cart.
Well, yeah, especially if we don't have those Amazon checkout services, because you never know what's going to happen to that stuff in there. You need like the
Oh
power
yeah,
of
definitely. I mean,
Amazon to. This
go through the
podcast not sponsored
turnstiles.
by Amazon in any way.
No, they are. They're definitely sponsoring them. In addition to Jamf and everyone else in the world. Coca-Cola, we drink you. I hear there's a new ginger flavor out in Japan. Go get it.
Yeah,
Pampers.
what is one? There's like a funky Pepsi flavor that you can find at Target right now. It's like in a gold can. It's supposed to be sort of like a ginger ale Pepsi. I'm nervous to try it because I'm
Really?
not the biggest Pepsi fan, but I love like ginger. So I wonder if
Mm.
we actually got a good version of that, or if it's just like, it's sugar water with like
It's.
some
I mean,
gold
isn't
coloring.
isn't everything sugar water with different sorts of acid?
Well, yeah, but we've had like a real proper sarsaparilla, like a really good old timey root beer, and they're really like there's some really aggressive flavor notes that go on in that. It's not
Mm.
just like syrup. When you get like a really crappy soda and it like coats your teeth and your mouth feels all gross and fuzzy, as opposed to like a really light, crisp sugarcane cola, an old timey cola, but then there are other flavors other than just sugar, and it's like
I
refreshing
mean,
and crisp.
I really wouldn't know since I haven't tasted that. But you know what is definitely a fun time that everyone can partake in? It's our holiday shopping guide. Hooray!
That's the worst segue ever.
Yeah, I know, but I had to get us
Yeah,
going since I mean,
yeah, we got to jump in, and it is a little
love to
late
talk about
already.
this kind of stuff, and besides the Target, there that you have where you can get that Pepsi 1878 or whatever the heck that label is. You can also get a bunch of iPads, tablets, smartphones. Well, maybe not necessarily the smartphones that you might want, but a lot of other smartphones available in other places. And we've been able to track down a whole bunch of things,
This is
lists,
true.
numbers for you. So, depending on what sort of tastes and needs that you like and the price ranges that you're concerned about, you can definitely take a look. We have our link in the rundown at pocketnow.com. And, well, you can just search for Holiday Shopping Guide 2016 if you would like to check that out.
And actually, you guys, putting this together, all of the editors that were involved in this,
It's just me.
no, what I was gonna say is it's a really good list. I thought it was you and Adrian, and then I remembered while I was halfway through that sentence that Adrian is off this week.
Yeah. Well,
But
he was off last week. Congratulations to him. Big shout out to
I
Adrian for getting his boy or girl. I haven't actually.
I didn't want to. I didn't know if he was wanting us to break that news, but apparently we should just go ahead and say
I
that
think we should
Adrian's
just
a
congratulate
first-time
him.
father, like
Hey.
close to this time last year, and so we're all very excited for him. But he got to take a little time off, and
Hey, yeah. Everyone's just popping out babies, but you know what? We're glad to have another
right.
person in the Pocket Now family right now.
We
So
should
yeah.
like put together sort of an extended Pocket Now family post, just like all of the spouses and kids and stuff. I think it could be pretty sweet. So
Maybe a slideshow thing. Let's take our website design and just pull it through every single little gimmick, little box that we can get in on that post. That'd be great.
I think we can make that happen. Maybe for New Year's, maybe we can put something together to kick off 2017 and celebrate, what's new. Literally, what's new.
Definitely so. Our
But
resolutions 4K.
But definitely, folks, check out that Pocket Now holiday shopping guide if you're catching this just a couple days before Christmas. What I love about the guide is how you wrote literally, Amazon Prime 2-day shipping won't save you at this point. It's
No.
over. You might actually have to like walk your sorry butt into a store. But if you're one of those procrastinators, I'm terrible about waiting until the last minute to get my shopping done. I did okay this year. Thankfully, my wife kind of kicked my ass a bit.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there are a lot
if you're one of those
actually.
folks, this list is pretty great.
It's amazing how many places are offering next day shipping now.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of a very much a belt pulling kind of get your butt in shape and do it before it does you.
So if you're rocking some type of movement tracking solution, you can get all your steps in. You'll have to fight off crowds of angry people who don't know how to drive or navigate parking lots. And then once you're done with all of that excitement, I would say treat yourself to a crisp, light, and refreshing old-timey cola. And that would be a fun way to sort of,
I would say just pop into the chicken now and get the 4-piece combo.
Oh, you can do better than that. You know what? You going out there, you doing some shopping for some other people. I think you need to add yourself to the list and treat yourself.
Treat yourself before you wreck yourself.
No. That's a bad 30 Rock. I'm not 30 Rock. Parks and Rec reference I'm trying to make there.
30 Parks and Rec.
But Twitter follower Abby Sheck is totally on my side. One of the best perks of the holidays. It's the best time to get anything tech related. So also, if you're doing a little shopping for yourself, I mean, that would be a time to do it.
Or you could wait until next year when the next iPhones will be coming out of their cages.
Very true. That was a much better segue. Now we can properly move over.
We get to the next place whenever we can, however.
it's the journey. It's not the destination. But we've got some rumors, and some people were messaging me on Twitter about this too. Apparently, there was some discussion following one of the Pocketnow dailies hosted by Jaime Rivera that their rumors are pointing to sort of maybe a split release for the iPhone next year. We've got the 10th anniversary coming up, and while we've been looking at some of the more exciting rumors surrounding a high-end device, that might also be backed up by more traditional iPhone release strategy, namely a 7S and a 7S Plus, next to a potential iPhone 8 codenamed Ferrari.
Yes. So this move would make sense with what we've been hearing about 3 iPhone models coming in, one being the big showboat of big screen and curved screen OLED and absorb home buttons and just this amazing glass prism of sorts, and then a couple of other models that are more conventional that still have a glass body but are just have that familiar form factor from the 7, 6S, 6, 5, 5S, 5C, 4S, 4.
You just became like a Sesame Street song in reverse. But no, I think this could be interesting. I think we've been talking about, flagship devices, the smartphone market in general, and it's becoming increasingly difficult, I think, for these manufacturers to get out there and really shake up what's become sort of an accepted standard for how we put a phone together. And I think if we walk away from 2016, if anything was positive about 2016, it was watching flagship grade hardware start sliding to the lower high-end tier, to the mid-range tier. There were a handful of $200 and $300 phones this year that really kicked butt in terms of performance and bang-to-buck ratio. And so a company like Apple really needs to do something to try and strike up some kind of emotional response. Part of buying a smartphone is that emotional response of buying something shiny. And that's that's one of the things that factors into a high end or a premium purchase. Does it really do the job better than a phone at half the price? Not really. It doesn't. It's not that much better, but there's something enticing about it, or there's something exclusive about it more than just the price. A lot of our viewers were maybe a bit skeptical about the Porsche designed Mate 9, for example, but that's an exclusive premium product with a label that means something to certain consumers out there. Maybe not to a lot of the people who actually watch this podcast or listen to this podcast, but a certain sect of consumers out there will be very interested in something like that. So if Apple can pull it off, then I think that's good ultimately for the industry. But I think it's going to be frustrating to a lot of tech fans, because I don't think those differences are going to come from really improving technology beyond what we currently have. It'll be more appealing to an emotional satisfaction. And that seems to get companies like Apple in trouble with us more gear-headed geeks.
I mean, in terms of a completely agnostic market point of view, we're seeing maturation. This is iPhone. Technically, this would be 10 and 11 at this point. So, people are just figuring out, okay, what the heck is going on and what do we need to do to make sure that we have a supply chain that can only supply so much of
Right.
what we want for the iPhone 8, which is with all those fancy little things. And Samsung is trying its best to make sure that that can happen. It's other suppliers are too, but there's only going to be so many units being made that I'll just stick to what they're able to do more of, which is the iPhone 7's body and whatnot,
Mhm.
and make sure that there's a price gulf, that there is a demonstrable price gulf, and hopefully, I don't see Apple going, being magnetized towards the lower tiers with these releases, because the iPhone S a stalled project in terms of not year to year iterations, but maybe an occasional thing. So maybe we'll see iPhone 7s at 649 and then 769 for the iPhone 8, or maybe even more. So
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's an exclusivity. Okay, I just started that sentence 4 times
if
and
there's
failed
an
to get anything out.
exclusivity,
Man, these late night podcasts, these are awesome. So exclusivity, I think, is valuable from a fashion standpoint. Putting out a device, not everyone gets to have this device, is one factor in being able to charge more for a product or a service. And so I don't necessarily feel that there's anything really terrible about Apple engaging in a strategy where most consumers will have access to a 7S and a 7S Plus, and then somewhere around the $1,000 price point will have an exclusive premium iPhone, very limited quantities, very limited access, and showcasing bleeding edge technology, bleeding edge for an iPhone technologies. That to me actually makes a lot of sense. It's the kind of thing that I wish more manufacturers would try to do. Like, I would love to see a Lumia 1020 style camera device. Panasonic tried to put out a 1-inch sensor smartphone, which unfortunately just never really got the handle of being a good phone, even though I'm sure it was probably a respectable camera. But a company going out of their way to say, like, we're only going to make a very small number of these, and because of that, we have to charge much, much more because it's a limited design. We're not going to have the benefit of really ramping up production on something like this. I think that's an acceptable conversation to have with an audience. And I kind of wish a few more manufacturers would do that, really putting the care and attention into making a one-off or a limited edition or something like that. So I'm kind of curious to see, like, is this really going to be the true special edition iPhone, not like what we got for the iPhone SE?
well, yeah, I mean, I think this is the failure of the democratization of the iPhone or any, smartphones, because when you think about it, you have all these options available to those who can afford them, or to
Right.
those who have good enough credit that they can finance these options. And hey, I mean, $40 a month, very digestible to someone who can, pile on the credit, or and and then you come to the mid-rangers that are only available directly from the manufacturers or Amazon or whatnot, and there are a one-time lump sum fee of $200, $300, $400, $500 even.
Mm-hmm.
uh, you're kind of just, okay, so it's costing way too much to about getting an iPhone 8, and even with an iPhone SE, I'm still kind of struggling by the paycheck to get to that and replace my phone, which is in bad need of replacing, let's say.
Right. No,
So
Jules, I agree. I just kind of feel like Apple's never going to be the company to properly democratize technology. Like right now, even the more traditional Android players, like Google, isn't the company anymore to democratize technology. I kind of feel like OnePlus can rightfully have that conversation. ZTE, Huawei with the Honor
well,
brand can rightfully have that conversation.
I
Apple, I kind of
after
look at as so. I mean, like because I agree with you in that it's a frustration or it's a failure for certain aspects of the market, especially for those folks who might want one of these devices and not be able to afford them. But I kind of feel like Apple properly launching a premium, a super high end luxury product even though it's not really going to be targeted for geeks, like Virtu, like it's covered in gold and studded with diamonds and is made of sapphire and crystal and all this wacky stuff, but it's got like a Qualcomm 400 series chipset and a quad a quarter VGA screen, like that's not good for for most consumers. It's not good for us geeks, but there's a notion of the capitalist side of this discussion where having something so way far out there, I think, is ultimately good for the market as a whole to sort of represent sort of the health of the smartphone, get someone sort of emotionally excited about it. And it's sort of like walking into a car dealership. I mean, we drive a Nissan and I love drooling all over the GTR when we're in the showroom. And then I drive home in a Sentra, like there's something, again, it's about getting the pulse up a little bit. It's about getting the emotions cranking a little bit. It's not always necessarily just about the nuts and bolts bang for buck. Situation that we try and justify our purchases after the fact. We try and rationalize why we needed a $600, $700, $800 phone, but then we start climbing into like $1,000, $1,500 territory. Like that's just silly. But there's something still kind of exciting about that notion.
I would go against the OnePlus being, a whole democratizing thing, because they followed up their OnePlus 3 immediately.
Oh no, I agree. I think they're still allowed at the table. It's a sub $500 phone. I think they're still allowed to have that chat.
Just by the fact
the hardware isn't radically different than a $600 plus Pixel.
Well, the way that they executed the thing, where they couldn't just by supply chain, they couldn't do continue to set Snapdragon 820. They had to go to Snapdragon 821 3T. They just basically forced everyone. I
agree. I don't disagree. Is that the right double negative to put in there? No, but you're right that they're trying to move their brand upscale also. But when I look at a OnePlus,
it's not even upscale,
Pixel,
but
they're trying to move up the food chain, though. They're climbing the ladder.
I mean, well, maybe I view them more as a Harley Davidson or like a mod car thing, where people, try and just, all right, this is the best that we can soup it up.
I couldn't afford a real Shelby Cobra, but I got this kit car. Is that the OnePlus 3 is?
Yeah, basically just, Scion the whole thing. Oh, poor Scion.
No, they're not like that. What I loved about Scion was they're really working this like youth angle, and these are like inexpensive vehicles for hip, trendy young people. And I see so many old people driving them. And it's like a reasonably priced car. It's comfortable. It's got some fun features. I think it's fun to drive. And you're like, whoa, you guys are really missing the market.
No, what you need is
buying this car.
What you need is the Kia Soul, because you could get with this, or you could get with that. You could get with this, or you could get with that. You could get with this, or you could get with that.
I think we've already just had our fifth copyright strike of the day thanks to that.
Well, I would get with that, because this is where it's at.
And so using the PN Weekly hashtag from Chamfered Edges, an even speedier iPhone successor due to the code name Ferrari, perhaps. And I doubt that an iPhone 8 will be any different in terms of performance from the iPhone 7S. I think it'll be more
the same innards.
I can't believe that they're going to have a completely different chipset. I think it's going to come down to things like the build quality of the screen, the wraparound screen design, the materials involved. I think the actual innards, the guts, and it'll probably come with more storage. I think the base model storage would probably be higher, because storage really isn't that expensive. I think that'll probably be the delineating factors, or all of those lifestyle and fashion accents, not the technology.
And storage, while inexpensive, you can charge up the wazoo for.
Right. Well, when you have no options to expand it. And speaking of phones that can potentially expand storage, we've got some interesting news about Samsung's strategy moving into the Galaxy S8. Jules, can you kind of break down what the timeline is looking like for Samsung next year?
I was a little scared there, because you said expanding devices. Well, definitely in a violent
expanding in one way. That's probably bad.
Yeah. So there's the word now that the Galaxy S8 is coming to us in New York City in April. We're going to get an Unpacked event there, sort of like how Samsung usually does its Note reveals. It did so this year for the Note 7. Last year, Note 5. It was both of them were in New York, and now
Mm-hmm.
we see this in April maybe, as we try and figure out what the heck is gonna be the cause of this Note 7 debacle. Like, why did it explode all these times that it did, and why the recall had to take place, especially after initial recall where
Mm-hmm.
Samsung decided that they fixed the problem. So
Right.
lots of questions that are still hanging in the air, and lots of questions about the leaks too, wherein uh, this there's been a memo from top up from DJ Co, the president of the mobile division, who basically just said, okay, enough of these leaks. We got to patch it up. No more Galaxy S8 talk. Make sure that the factories in China know about this, because we can't take this anymore. And as far as we know, this may be it for what we know about the innards of the Galaxy S8s. I mean, we've
Well,
already known a lot about them
but
already.
this is also, I mean, so we've been covering Galaxy S8 rumors since the beginning of the Galaxy Note 7 debacle.
Of time.
This would fly in the face of a lot of the information we'd been sort of trafficking in earlier, in that we were looking at a Samsung potentially trying to speed up or get a little bit more aggressive with the launch of the
Hmm.
S8 to try and quiet the memories of the Note 7. And this sort of flies in the face of that notion that Samsung might be instead trying to take their time, get those last final pieces put in place to make sure that this launch is as smooth as possible. And if that's true, that's a Samsung that I want to see. That's a Samsung that I feel is taking their competition seriously and their place in the market, their consumer relationships seriously. That makes me a bit more interested, or at least willing to sort of hold off and see what they have to release for next year, and not worrying that they're trying to accelerate. We were talking about that, I think around a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. The fear of Samsung accelerating their product timetables to try and get ahead of this is, in my opinion, the wrong reply to the massive disaster that was the Note 7.
Yeah, but April though, because we heard later on, even before this revelation, that maybe this was going to be a more traditional launch after MWC, or maybe even during MWC, but
Yeah.
February, March timeline. But April's kind of unprecedented for Samsung to just wait out, because we've seen LG pull in their releases more towards MWC. We've seen Motorola
Mm-hmm.
sort of take over the summer, but they've been doing a little bit of pulling in themselves too.
Right.
So I'm not really sure what this means in terms of fighting out the competition and clearing the air, or just making sure that they even have an idea that this thing will not blow up on them as much as the Note 7 did.
Well, what's fascinating is Samsung, I think, gets one mulligan. I think this is their one big, we'll wait to see how you respond to it situation. There are still reports that what was one of the headlines that I read on Reddit, that there are still more Note 7s out being used than all of the V20s that have been sold in the same period
Yeah,
of time.
yeah.
So
B20s, three T's, and also another phone, the Moto.
oh, that's right. And
the-
yeah. And so when you factor that against the fact that I think most Note owners probably opted for an S7 or an S7 Edge, Samsung, this is like the one do-over that they get. Like, if they screw up again, then I think that's absolutely disastrous for the brand. But they had built up so much momentum and so much customer goodwill that one instance like this means that they can make this move. They can delay their announcement, they can delay their launch, and customers will still wait for them to make their move to see what they do. And so also, I think a number of people will probably wait just to make sure there aren't any major problems with the phone. But I think Samsung is one of the only companies that could probably get away with that. The only other one being Apple. Like if Apple were to make a mistake of the same significance, I'll be really curious to see. But it's one of those things, in my opinion, and not really being the biggest Samsung fan anymore. This is the kind of reply I'd want to see from the company. We're going to take our time. We're going to disclose what we found in our investigation of the Note 7. We're going to make sure our next product launch is great. And that to me is taking their market position seriously. That's taking their relationship with customers and handling it with respect.
I love if Panzer bring up the Kia Soul.
I just pulled up Twitter. So we have a couple more tweets from the PN Weekly hashtag from Panzer Z. Robots, hamsters, and an apocalyptic dystopia. Kia Soul. This is how you advertise to the young people. And
Yep.
he's got the GIF of that Kia Soul ad, which is so terrible.
Yeah, welcome to Fury Road with hamsters.
Anthropomorphic hamsters. And then also again from Chamford Edges, PN Weekly. Hope the extended unveil date would be ample enough to prevent another Note successor. Well, from outside, it doesn't seem like any other larger devices have completely unseated what the Note brought to the table. Like I said, most people went for the Galaxy S7, and this also could be a time for Samsung to regroup. Like if they want to walk away from the Note branding because they feel it's tainted, then this is a way that they could do an S8, an S8 Edge, and an S8 Pro. It's a way for them to tier their device strategy in a slightly different way so that customers don't mentally link, products that explode to new products that are out there. And then we also have from Ed Modlin, the OnePlus brand was stable. Modern phones. The OnePlus brand was modern phones for a good price. Samsung post-mortem unpacked too much. PN Weekly. I'll be curious to see how OnePlus handles 2017. For that reason, just because we got this weird refresh. The OnePlus 3T is just odd timing for what we would expect a company like OnePlus to deliver. So it's an opportunity for them to show us that they can also still do something cool in the first half of 2017. But if we're going to be getting OnePluses every 6 months, I think it's going to start falling prey to what is that? The Osborne effect, where customers just wait and they never really buy anything.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I expect that this is more likely to do with the Snapdragon 835 being this biggest of big improvements to the series so far. So maybe they're just hoping that the price will come down just a little bit more before they start chewing up margins on that.
And that they'll probably move up to a Quad HD screen. No, I mean,
that's always the hope.
No, I think that could be, that could be the next OnePlus refresh. Is, they probably started, finding difficulties in sourcing the 820 versus the 821.
Yeah.
Just as sort of chip fab was getting moved over. And once the 835 is out, then they move over to that, and they have a better argument to then also tweak something else like screen resolution, so that that OnePlus can start having the same conversations about things like VR.
Yeah. I mean,
that's my take.
They're behind. I mean, they're good at making headsets for phones, but where's the rest of it?
Yeah, the full strategy on all these different devices, and a company that we're going to be getting a much better.
Speaking of full strategy,
well, we were talking about companies that were trying to move up their device strategy, and it looks like HTC might be trying to fill the void left by early announcements in Samsung at the beginning of 2017. They have something big up its sleeve coming January 12. And what do
for
you think
you
that might be?
Yeah, there's this big invite, for you. And it talks about this date. HTC's has a C at the end, but if they have it oriented in a way that, the U, it becomes more like a U. So there's a whole bunch of speculation about what this could mean. We don't think, honestly, that they would launch the HTC 11 this quickly. Although, who knows? They might just capitalize on what's going on with Samsung at this point. but maybe they could take a little bit more time with development and such. In the meantime, we do think that what's going on here might be Under Armour development. They've been partnering with the fitness company for device releases such as, what was it, the Grip, the Health Box. Those came
Yeah.
out last year around this time. So
Well, and we've been on like this on again off again rumor train of HTC working on wearables or working on a smartwatch or working on a fitness tracker. They were originally going to be working on a Qualcomm Talk follow-up. At one point there was a rumor back in the day, and nothing has ever really materialized. So now would be not a terrible time for HTC with a sort of a slightly reinvigorated coolness reputation to deliver something that could be
slightly.
well, I think it's the right time for them to diversify. I was going to make a terrible joke like, I'm telling you now it's going to be a Vive phone, and like that was actually going to be pretty lame. Not that a Vive phone would be lame, that my joke about there being a Vive phone was going to be lame. So now
You can make
explaining the lameness of the joke
connections.
is way better. uh, but
Well,
but a
I'm
strategic
glad I'll be
partnership, I
seeing you at the
think.
comedy stop soon.
Well, what I was going to say, a strategic partnership like Under Armour, this could be a good time for HTC to show that it's continuing to diversify its
Yeah.
product lineup. So it's not just,
I mean, they did that a couple of years ago, right? They had like a whole thing about, 4 quadrants of life with smartphones, with
yeah.
uh, maybe VR health, and then also the V camera, which was that camera that kept getting on discount every Tuesday,
You know,
and
the
no one is
the
still able to buy.
frustrating thing about that is that they weren't wrong. You know what I mean? It was, they put out this one product, and this is kind of the same thing. I would hammer Samsung for this too. The Gear 360 had very little sort of full company support behind that product, and it didn't sell very well. Same thing with LG with their 360-degree action camera. And I guarantee you that there are now people in the sort of middle upper tiers of those companies going, well, they didn't sell, I guess we shouldn't make any more. And I think if HTC had continued improving and iterating, they would be a competitive force in the action camera market. They'd be able to build on that for other products and services and features and tie-ins to things like the Vive and tie-ins to things like their smartphones. They would have inroads there. Instead, they put it out there, they sort of limped it out into the market. It didn't instantly become a top seller, and then they sort of let it wither on the vine. And too many companies let that happen, where they don't seem to be willing to invest in the long-term aspects of actually having a product like that, which could be a good way to differentiate yourself from the competition.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all these little branches that come to an end in favor of this whole idea of a trunk, or developing a truck, a different trunk of sorts.
so,
Like,
so
I
Jules,
wonder
before
where.
we move on to the next story, I've got this from the PN Weekly hashtag. I want to throw this one at you and just get your thoughts. This comes from Steve Becker. Do you think HTC will ever be a competitive brand in the future, as in going head to head with Samsung and LG? What do you think, Jules?
At this point, it's going to take years, and I don't think, in terms of the smartphone industry, we have years before to make this competitive again. Um, we're well into maturation point, and we're just trying to find where the heck people will disseminate information next. And it's still going to be mobile. It's still going to be,
Oh yeah.
something that we'll cover. It's just going to be how now, and will it, will it encompass a form that we will be able to properly critique, and yeah,
You
that's
said
gonna be it.
criticize. We'll always be
Criticize.
able to properly criticize something. I can
Yeah,
like something and still criticize the crap out of it.
but critique was the proper word for it, so I
No,
just
that was the right word. So this also from Jonas Timothy Gamal.
Gamal.
Uh,
Gamal.
and so this is kind of going hand in hand with what Steve Becker asked. Do you think HTC should make a tablet, laptop, or convertible? And
Oh,
I
hell yeah.
don't think so. I don't think so. Not to like step on
No.
you. What I think HTC should be looking at are what future markets there are. And I think a number of tech companies, whenever they start playing overly defensive or they start getting a little reactionary, there's a notion like, oh, well, HTC should go back and make another tablet or something like that. And I kind of feel like the tablet market is so stalled right now that HTC going back to make another one doesn't really bring anything new to the table. So it doesn't feel like HTC is doing anything fresh. They could make the best tablet ever. And I think a number of people would go, and it doesn't really get people talking. I like the biggest boost for HTC over this year was kicking ass at the VR game. That got HTC, the name HTC in those circles, especially in the gaming circles, became a hip company again. And it's those types of opportunities that I think HTC needs to be focused on. You still service a smartphone market. You can still put out carrier spec phones like the Bolt, which I think are kind of mediocre at best. And then you actually focus the company on what future markets will look like. Exactly what you were talking about, Jules, in that we don't necessarily know what the next generation of mobile interaction will look like. But if HTC can get ahead of the pulse, it can get ahead of the curve, then I think the company will be a cool, profitable, competitive company. If it's just like, oh, well, can they go toe to toe with Apple for making smartphones? I think that's sort of an over discussion. I think that's kind of
that bus has sailed.
Retired. Yeah, absolutely. To continue mixing all of our metaphors.
But yeah, I mean, VR is their way. They have all the money towards it. They have all the partners towards it. Now it's just trying to get the cavalry to move in one direction at the same pace, and just making sure that that they can be part of other. All right, so convertible tablets, I think, are still on their way up. They're still in the lower floors of things, relatively speaking. And if HTC can put up a killer argument for making mobile VR much better than just phone VR, and just shy of even full-blown stand-up PC VR, I think that would be the killer app that would go.
No, I agree. But also on top of all that, I think what you're talking about there, not to put words in your mouth, sorry, Jules, but part of what you're talking about there is also sort of changing what it means to have an interaction with a mobile device. If we're talking, can HTC make something which can rightfully compete against desktop grade VR solutions, or is just head and shoulders above current phone virtual reality solutions? We're talking about a gadget which would probably also start walking us away from the accepted way that we interact with phones and tablets. And that's where I agree with you. I think if HTC can bring that to the discussion, then they will be competitive, but not competitive just they make a good smartphone. We know they can make a good smartphone.
Yeah.
They'll be competitive in driving the bus. They'll be competitive in directing where the future of mobile interactions go.
Yeah. I only hope that this ocean thing really, turns out, and we get these, touchless side, these buttonless side rails that you can touch, and all these interactions on Sense UI. I mean, we've sort of seen that with ZT Nubia doing that kind of thing, but we haven't got much out of China.
Although
from that.
I'm telling you, if this big announcement that they've got in January is just like, we've made a fitness band, HTC.
I mean, you're going to have
to give us a big announcement, and then they're like, it counts your steps for you. You're like, that's not a thing anymore.
I mean, the money from Under Armour is there, so they're going to have to.
But it's like it's sacrificing HTC's reputation to take that Under Armour cash, and it's not worth it. HTC.
But this thing is
not worth it.
No. This product, whatever it is for you.
Now, sort of piggybacking on that question from Jonas, we do actually have some news, some rumors pointing to a Chromebook from Lenovo. So we've got the yoga book. We actually did a review on Pocketnow of the yoga book. I've got mine right here.
The Android version, I believe, right?
The Android version of it. I actually did. Okay, so a lot of people were talking mad shit about ours wanting to review the Android version of the yoga book over the Windows version of the yoga book. And one of the main things that I kind of needed on this device was the predictive text capabilities, which aren't properly supported in Windows 10. And so I actually did. I requested to review the Android version because after using both at IFA, I felt that the Android version was actually the superior product for a lot of what I felt people were apt to do on it. The Android version, I think, actually made more sense, especially once you start using this completely smooth surface keyboard area, sketch area. You kind of need a little software support to help you make sure words are properly spelled. It does actually help improve your typing error rate. So
do you think that the Android's cousin is going to fare worse off because of its lack of that feature? Chrome OS is just a Windows wannabe with Chrome and like cousin like status to
all 10
Android.
Chrome OS
Maybe the
fans
apps
just threw their boots through their computer monitors at you, Jules. They are not happy
well,
with
especially
you right now. How dare you?
well, they probably ran out of clothes to throw at me after the whole Hiroshi Lockheimer saying that, oh, we're not actually doing Andromeda. So yeah, that's it's Google Assistant all the way, people. You guys should know this.
Well, that's where I'm torn. I have very little very little interaction. I've had very little interaction with Chrome OS. It's not something it's not something that really fits any part of my workflow better than current phone and tablet solutions. So I'm just the wrong person to ask about this, but I keep seeing potential in the same way that I still see some potential with Microsoft's, one OS for everybody kind of strategy. And for Google to be playing coy about Andromeda or that Chrome OS might not be making that merge happening, but we're seeing all of these indicators for Android apps on Chrome OS and things like that. They're walking slowly towards a more cohesive operating system strategy, especially a more robust operating system strategy than what Chrome originally was sort of birthed as this. It's a browser, everything lives in the cloud. We know now that that's not really how people use their technology, and it's going to be a while before the infrastructure really supports sort of just a dumb terminal, everything's up floating above your head kind of computing style. But if we continue to put out good hardware, and Lenovo's going to the Yoga Book is really well executed hardware. It's not the best typing experience, but there's something so just unique about it. And it's so well put together that I think it can only help to serve, it can only help to benefit Chrome OS in general, even if it won't necessarily help Chrome OS like explode. Like, it's not going to be some big top seller and consumers are going to be salivating all over it. But, improvement is improvement. And hopefully it sets the stage for where we might end up on Andromeda.
Yeah, well, let's just hope that improvement proves itself over time.
But yes, that is always our hope. So just a quick,
because this is a lateral move if you're asking
well,
me.
I mean, to be fair, we are Pocket now. We're not like Pocket tomorrow. So, speculating about the future, why would we do that? From Abhishek, in my opinion, one of the best HTC builds was the polycarbonate build of the HTC One X Plus. Completely agree. I miss that era of phones, especially the matte finish Lumia polycarbs were gorgeous. Then from Chamfered Edges, I'd rather get the Windows version of the Yoga Book. It does feel weird with Android loaded on it, tongue sticking out emoticon. I was really torn. There's so much that I would have thought, well, I want Windows 10 on this. I want it to be more of that netbook style computing experience. And yet I have OneDrive on there. I have Word and Excel and PowerPoint on there. My core Microsoft services are well covered. And then I can also fire up Marvel Future Fight, do a little gaming. And I kind of feel like, for me personally, I'm not going to speak for anyone else, but for me personally, I kind of feel like the Android version was the better fit. And then also from Steve Becker, should there be more dual boot Android, Windows, mainstream tablet laptops, or would that be too niche of a product? And unfortunately, I kind of think it would be. I've played with a number of sort of low cost Chinese solutions, these dual booting environments that I think it's just a little too complicated for people to understand things like how your storage is formatted. You know, it's like, I know I've got 64 GBs. And then you're like, well, 20 GBs are for Windows and 30 GBs are for Android. How does that work? You know, so those types of things I think might stand in the way of accessibility. And not to say that you can't solve those problems. You can absolutely solve those issues. But for anyone who's feeling like they might want that dual OS on one device strategy, I think emulation is probably a better way to go.
Yeah, as unfortunately as it is right now. Maybe they can like emulate Windows 10 on Android someday.
I mean, you know what? Once we start seeing Windows 10 with proper ARM emulation support out in the wild, I wouldn't be surprised. But I'll tell you
Just
one
have
company who's probably not going to be making that transition or supporting those kinds of products is a
really.
company that sold way better than I was expecting for the second half of 2016.
Well,
And now
hello,
we're looking
Sony.
at this wacky chart, but essentially what this chart is showing us is out of all of the phones that might have stepped up to fill the void left by the Note 7, the Sony Xperia XZ became one of the highest selling flagships of the second half of 2016. I can't believe this.
Yeah.
I honestly look at those numbers and I'm shocked. I'm shocked, I tell you.
Well, I mean, Japan had its strategies shifted up, and I think it's doing them right so far. So we have all this talk about how the Note 7 is just cratering Samsung's uh, brand and whatnot. And then we have all these other phones out there that were launched in the second half of this year that were kind of milk toast, including what we called we called it the Xperia XZ, but we called it milk toast as well. And there were more interesting, more spectacular kind of releases from Motorola, from not really HTC, but from LG. OnePlus had its thing going on there, and of all things, it turns out that with 0.15% of the total Android market so far, the Sony Xperia XZ is just killing it. Everyone else is struggling to get out of the 0.06, 0.07 range, and here we are. It took like a couple of months for it to just skyrocket. So,
But we can kind of explain some of these numbers, right? The LG V20 had a very limited release. The Google Pixel also, its initial launch was targeted to a couple different regions. OnePlus is still facing 5-week, 6-week shipping delays for orders placed today. And for the first time in recent memory, Sony actually got the XZ out to a number of markets roughly close to the same time as their Japanese release. This really does sort of support our hypothesis that when you advertise and you actually ship products to different regions, those products seem to sell better.
yeah, exactly.
Who would have thought?
It's amazing what a little money towards the marketing can do. But yeah,
Right.
there's just too much. I don't know. Should we be happy for Sony, or should we be angry?
No. Okay,
still
so here's the thing. I am ultimately happy for Sony. They're a company I try very hard. I want to like. I've got my XZ right here, and there's so much about this phone which is so much improved over the Xperia X. The Xperia X was a miserable range of devices for me to wrap up reviews on. By the time I got to the X Performance, I was hating my life with Sony, and the XZ while I still think there are a number of options out there which might fit people better, especially in some of like the $400 range too, where you can kind of target the things that you want, the things that you don't. This is so much improved over the Xperia X, and the X Performance. The X Performance was just an abortion of a phone. This is more in keeping with what we would expect from a flagship device, even if I do think it's priced higher than it should be. Ultimately,
Well,
this is what I would call progress. So if this is what spurs Sony to be taking more markets seriously, especially the North American market, and to continue improving their products, then I'll call that a win.
all right. I mean, it really. I think it just matters that they're out there and that
Well,
they care
you're right.
actually
It
about.
ultimately matters that they're available to buy.
Yeah. I mean, it's great,
That's
I mean,
totally
we
true.
kind of just sideswept, their phones into the review bin because we've been so stuffed with all these devices lately, and we just sort of gave them like the side treatment. Uh,
Well, it
and
wasn't.
even with
No,
like the whole,
that's actually, I'm going to fight you on that. That wasn't true.
okay,
It wasn't that we've ever put Sony off to the side. And for anyone who's watching this or listening to this, if you've caught Pocketnow coverage in the past, you would know that our editor in chief Tony is a Sony fanatic.
mm,
That is one of the brands that he grew up with, and he would never let a Sony review opportunity just sit on the side. When we get these things, we aggressively cover them. The problem with the X, going from the Z5 to the X, we were months behind in getting review units or in being able to purchase them for our region. So by the time we got the X Performance here in the United States and we could get our hands on a unit to review, the X Performance had been out for months. So it wasn't that we pushed it off to the side, is that Sony sort of pushed North America off to the side. And then with the XZ was much smarter about getting that hardware out to people to play with.
yeah.
And so that's reflective, I think, in the sales numbers.
Yeah, in the case of the XZ, we did a better job at trying at putting. Well, not it's not really that. It's more the fact that we've been dealing with so many of these releases, and that some things take priority over others because the names and the past performances of the brands we're talking about here, or even just like the newness of the brands in the US. So I mean, just by default, in those cases, like that sort of had something to do with our kind of with at least my malaise, and with
not only your malaise but also your marmalade. No,
marmalade.
that is absolutely accurate. That is important. I just feel like there's such a current in our comments about how we're anti-Sony, when really I don't know that could be farther from the truth from the team of people who are passionate Sony fans at Pocketnow, and just sort of fans without a country. It's they don't have access to these products yet they really want to be talking about them. And the same thing kind of happened with us, where we never really could get our hands on a compact at the most busy part of our review schedule for Mate 9s and Pixels and LG V20s. That one did kind of get pushed off to the side because one wasn't sent our way. But the XZ, as soon as we got the XZ, we were on top of at least trying to talk about it, even though I know it took us a while to get reviews out. Got a couple tweets here from Chamford Edges using the PN Weekly hashtag. 5 to 6 weeks, yet their 100 OnePlus 3Ts giveaway can take a week or under to deliver. Yeah, funny how certain YouTubers got 100 OnePlus 3Ts to give away, and yet there's still like a month back order on customers trying to buy that product. It seems like priorities are a little out of whack there. Then from Panzer Z, using the PN Weekly hashtag, advertising and actually making the product available leads to sales. Who would have thunk it? And then he's got this really
Mind blown.
this really great GIF on that too. And then from Sunlight, hi PN Weekly, I'm proud to be a blind user of an Acer Chromebook. Not a fan of Windows, though can't wait for Google Play support. That's really interesting. This is something that we continue to try and look at how we might cover it. But it's something that, unfortunately, I have to admit we've been woefully negligent in talking about some of the accessibility issues on mobile technology, especially when we get to, like I can't imagine that using an all smooth surface yoga book would be the best way to interact with technology for someone who's maybe, got some sight
Yeah.
issues.
And because it's
Um,
so niche, like the whole thing about being able to produce braille input or braille output for, or just even
right.
like multimedia content, that's got to be a tough time, and very few sources can be able to provide that kind of thing. So yeah, it's tough to get into, tough, and but I think that at least we should try as a public service, or something. Like there has to be initiatives there.
I mean, the tricky thing is obviously my perspective on that is going to be skewed, as I'll be looking at accessibility options for someone who might be hearing impaired or vision impaired, and I'm neither. So like my opinion on the matter is a little less valuable as to whether or not I think something might be good. But
Mm.
shifting gears, because we do have some politics to talk about. And you're gonna have to
Do we now?
talk me through this one. I read our story on Pocketnow.com, and I still can't quite wrap my brain exactly around what's going on over at T-Mobile.
So T-Mobile is being accused by a worker labor advocacy group watchdog thing called Change to Win, that its managers have been on the mandate that they should probably sell more, and attain sales goals that just are tougher and tougher the more that they pile on. And that has led to coercing, maybe their managers tell, well, just make it up, just fraud. So if
Oh,
you're thinking about doing putting Wells Fargo into this situation in terms of making fake accounts or whatnot, then yeah, you're pretty much right. According to FTC complaints to the industry as a whole, we saw
mm-hmm.
complaints jump dramatically at T-Mobile from 21 per million subscribers to 29 per million subscribers. That's from between 2013 and 2014, and 2015, 60 per million subscribers. And then in just the half year of 2016 that they logged 95 per million subscribers. And that just pales when you look at the others, which aren't even that bad. 69 was the closest that Verizon gets, and Sprint is the highest total we see here is 21. So
Now, is
there's
this
that.
similar to some of the fines that were levied against the other carriers for
There are no
enrolling
fines.
customers? Oh,
We haven't seen any enforcement action or anything like
okay.
that just yet, but many employees have been told, or have told Change to Win that they've had, they've been pushing insurance policies on their devices, phone
Mm-hmm.
insurance, other such services, bundled accessories, extra lines, and some of them the customer on the customer side, 36% of a 2,200 person poll, 2,200 customer poll said that they paid more per month. No, wait, 56% said that they paid more per month than what was advertised, and that 83% of 500 associates at T-Mobile, anonymous, can't say things, anonymous. They didn't give their names
That's
to
okay. I'm
tell.
happy I'm not trying to say it. You're doing fine.
They didn't give their names to tell that they were under pressure to cram services and products not explicitly requested by the customer, and just some days they would just put in like a jump policy, so that you get the early upgrade program and device insurance. Like they would put in a jump policy for a new customer,
Right.
and then take it off days later just to meet a sales goal for that day.
Oh, so that's like the proper shady, where there's a behavior which is demonstrably deceitful, that
Yeah.
they're doing something which there's
It's
like no confusion on the policy. That can't be something that was
well,
intended to be done straight up like that.
like they the managers even just jibe them a little bit, say, if you want to make those goals, then maybe you should just try and do that. And there's this one a manager who says, no one says I want to work at T-Mobile to do fraud, but a lot of reps do it because they want to keep their jobs and they want to get the pay they need. A lot of low income workers at
Right.
T-Mobile, they aren't bad or dishonest people, but there's just a lot of pressure. And there's a petition going around in terms of employees trying to get John Ledger, the CEO of T-Mobile, to address these issues, and he hasn't really talked about this stuff. This, in the whole scheme of things, where T-Mobile's just like, oh, we're doing something at CES. What's next? Well, you'll find out later. And also the splitting of the T-Mobile One plan, where it's like,
Right.
there's T-Mobile One International. Like, it just doesn't it just doesn't feel right with me, especially because they've been hammered time and time again about labor conditions at the stores, and also just the fact that it's kind of deceptive that no contract offerings were no contract when you have obligations for a device. You don't have a service
Right.
contract, but you have a phone contract that you have to pay off once you decide that you're out of T-Mobile. So yeah, it's just
Well,
very
that's also
aggressive
pretty.
behavior.
I was going to say that's also very disappointing that it's being handled that way, and that we haven't heard more word from the top. It's moves like that. I mean, it was something similar where maybe not in the same way that reps were signing people up for services and then canceling, but something very similar that I think it was AT&T just got fined for recently, where people were getting signed up for services that were adding cost to bills, and there was a class action, and I believe
Yeah, they
even
were cramming
Verizon
in
got caught up in something like
third
that
party
recently
services
too.
on the bills.
Exactly, that's right.
This is just
This is a
they
first
had
party
more.
service. It's not a third party
Yeah,
service.
no, this is way more incentive, and if complaints get into the FTC and they take action, and there's, well, maybe not during the Trump administration
Right.
possibly, but
Yeah. Uh,
yeah.
uh, from Panzer Z on Twitter using the PN Weekly hashtag, because of shady store workers, I now only do stuff over the phone direct with T-Mobile. I've always had to cancel random extras. Someone saying that they've had firsthand experience with this kind of practice. And then from Ed Modlin, it's very smoky, under the table, shady crap. And we always have these. This is one of the things that I think, especially over the next couple of years. Uh, I hope we see sort of a consumer revolution in, maybe we don't look to these companies to help inform our like daily fashion or style or identity. Like, yeah, are you an iPhone person or a Galaxy person? Are you T-Mobile or are you Verizon? This is not a team. This is a multi-billion
Yeah,
dollar corporation which looks to extract as much wealth out of the system as they can to provide benefit for their shareholders. And
yeah.
we should expect, good service in return for the extraction of our income,
Mhm.
of our wealth. It's not a friend of ours who's working to be our buddy. It's a giant corporation which is offering a service for a price. And so
And
hopefully we can
we
walk
should be
away.
clear. Yeah, Ed Modlin, who also works with Metro PCS, which is a subsidiary of T-Mobile, he told me just now on the PN Weekly hashtag that it is the angry god of ARPU. ARPU being average revenue per user, and
Yeah.
historically, T-Mobile has had, I think, some of the lowest in the industry. So if they can get those bills up, and one way to do so would be, putting in those insurance plans.
Well, yeah, I mean, one way to increase revenue is just to sign people up for services they didn't
That
ask for.
didn't sign up for. Yep.
Oh, wow. So another sort of not political bummer, but just a sticky political topic that we're running into,
Right.
especially what with some of the political climate that we're apt to see from the people that Trump has appointed to his cabinet. People who have been very vocal about trying to, for example, weaken the FCC's jurisdiction over businesses and services internet related is that we've gotten some replies from AT&T and Verizon responding to the FCC on some of the topics we've been talking about, where they have first party content that can go out for free on their networks, but then other companies, their content counts against a consumer's data plan. And something that I personally, I feel this flies in the face of net neutrality. And this is absolutely one reason why, net neutrality is probably going to be under attack very, very soon, is because of these sort of corporate interests. If I'm a major ISP, I want you to use my services, so I'll make it painful for you to use a competitor's, because I have content and I also have the pipes that deliver that content, which I feel is a direct conflict of interest.
I'll make it painful for the competitors who don't have their own.
Well, and often it's both. Often it's I'm going to make it painful for the competitors, and I will make it costlier for the consumers, which to me is a lose-lose. When those first-party services typically aren't as good as the competition. I have On Demand with Time Warner. It's not as good as Netflix. I like Netflix better. Netflix is easier to use. It's available across more devices seamlessly. And my On Demand is constantly crapping out. Whereas, my internet connection isn't terrific thanks to Time Warner. but for what it is, Netflix as the service has never failed on me. It's only ever been my pipe from Netflix to my house has failed on me. And that's not Netflix's fault.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can always tune into channel 1020.
Is it so over here? It's channel 1000 is On Demand. And
1000, not 1020. Okay, yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I'm sure it's different on and every other thing, but that's just it. Is I often can't. I've gone through 3 different cable boxes. I've been on multiple support calls, and I can't tell you how many times I've rebooted this damn box. And it still doesn't function with the reliability that Netflix can. Even when our internet connection is running for crap, I can switch over to LTE and still watch something on Netflix where I can't from my dedicated home cable connection with the same consistency and uptime that Netflix can offer. So I'm happy to pay my $8 a month for Netflix, whereas I'm paying a lot for cable internet and an expanded TV package, which I can't fully benefit from Time Warner. And yet we're watching the industry start to make that.
I'm sorry, Spectrum.
Oh God. I just feel so gross even just saying the word Spectrum. It's just such a terrible name for a company in an age where we're trying to have conversations about mental health and child empowerment and autism and things like that.
Yeah. And there's also the fact that, I'll just use this as my soapbox for just a second, but they're ruining New York One.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they introduced a new L bar to it. So they've squeezed away Pat Kiernan and in favor of rundowns and weather information, and also weather and transit information, which is kind of nice. But when you don't need to know what happens in in the next 15 minutes because they're on a wheel. We know you should know what the wheel is by now, people. But that's just me not even living in New York, but knowing about New York One. Spectrum News.
That's no fun. Yeah. But just in wrapping up this story here,
what's fun, but not really.
Oh, what's that?
Porn.
Oh, okay. We're done with AT&T and Verizon then. That's fine. Yeah. No, I'm good moving on because we're not really going to talk about porn as much as we're going to talk about lawmakers who want to block consumers' access to porn unless you pay some kind of porn extortion fee. They're saying it's not a tax. And I love this logic. It's the same thing, like my Texan relatives love to say, oh, we don't pay taxes here in Texas. And then you're like, anytime you get on a road, it's a toll road. You can call it a toll. You can call it a fee. You can call it a surcharge. It's all the same. You're paying money to a government for a service. Welcome to paying taxes. Please understand that.
Yeah, welcome to Texas.
Yeah, but you know what? You're not wrong. So
as opposed
we're
to Massachusetts and California.
right, California. That one almost works, and I love you for it. But again, it's one of those things like, I kind of feel the whole idea is, what am I getting for paying that money? And I feel like we do okay here in California, especially considering we're subsidizing like what? 6 or 7 other debtor states that get way more in federal funds than we pay in taxes and we receive from the federal government. But I digress. This
largest economy in the union, people.
Well, and I think we make up something like 15% of the overall United States GDP, and we just surpassed Great Britain as one of the world's largest economies. But no, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah,
we're gonna talk about conservative politics and picking yourself up by your bootstraps while we subsidize a ton of the United States. And that's great. It's great. We're the wacky coastal left wing. No, it's fine. It's fine. We want to fix getting money for our taxes. Maybe we should just sort of reset what states get what funds from the federal government, since we're all about states' rights, right?
Oh yeah.
Anyway. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about porn.
Yeah.
So South Carolina, WTF. There's a bill going up in South Carolina which would prevent, if you buy a computer in South Carolina, they want to install either some type of software or hardware which would prevent users from accessing pornographic materials online unless you pay a $20 unlock porn fee.
Yeah,
then you can consume that content.
Let's parse this, because I feel like there are a lot more implications than just First Amendment things. So either manufacturers and retailers having to install the program, or opt out and pay that $20 fee themselves, or the consumers, having to deal with the filter themselves and then paying the $20 fee. Either way, it goes to a fund that is supposed to combat human trafficking, which is a very valid problem, and we should be doing something to solve that. But the link between this, all right, so the upstate, I think, representative, his name is Mike Burns, I believe. And he says that if you're, viewing pornography is a slippery slope. It leads to one thing and another, and suddenly you're participating in the propagation of child porn. And I think that is carried to extreme. For some people, he has a point.
No. I would want to see, again, I'm not saying it's not true. I see no evidence for that slippery slope argument in any kind of aggregate. What I would want to see is the data to back that up. If we're talking about this being a public works, a public good, we need to not just sort of throw out these truthiness statements. We need to actually demonstrate that free and accessible pornography on the internet has more than just a casual relationship to human trafficking and some of the dirtier aspects of online subjugation and abuse of different peoples that are traded for currencies. I'm really trying to be delicate about how we're talking about this, because that is a very serious problem. And we've seen some progress in how these rings of terrible people who trade in pedophile materials, people who trade in sex slave materials, the federal government, state governments, and governments around the world have actually been stepping up their involvement in actually breaking some of these rings online, these rings that go sort of dark web. I don't think, again, not having any data in front of me, but I've not seen anything that would suggest to me that the consumption of freely available pornography on the internet, the web that we can track, has any direct correlation to someone becoming one of these traffickers of like really, really bad stuff.
Yeah.
So before we go throwing laws around and extorting money from people to consume content which doesn't harm anybody, it's something you're doing in the privacy of your
It's a
home.
healthy, yeah, it's healthy in, the way that you should practice it. I think that we poorly educate people about how to deal with this kind of material in the first place. So
Well, and we're making
maybe solve that problem.
a species. You're absolutely right there. I mean, if we want to have these kinds of conversations, then one, I feel we need to be having them younger and in a more educational setting for
No,
people.
abstinence is totally the way.
Well, I don't know. I mean, like I never would have thought South Carolina being one of those one of those parts of the country that was so hopped up on this sort of nanny state idea, that we're going to
Puritan
protect
kind of
people
thing.
from themselves. I know it's a part of the South, sort of,
But
it's
here's
north
all
of
right.
Florida,
So
but
there's more to this because the execution of this filter, which is available, it'd be a market solution. So
Mhm.
there's that. But the execution of it would block out material dubbed obscene by state and federal definitions and would also have a flag down system for
Right.
people to use and come across unblocked obscene material, and that just opens up another can of worms about and potentially blocking people from actually are safe legal in that
Mhm.
sense content, just putting paywall
And
against.
I'm always curious to know who gets to decide. The Supreme Court can't decide on where the line is for smut, for where the line is on obscene. They just sort of know it when they see it, right? That's always been
Yeah,
the legal justification for why you can't just create a one size fits all statute to block obscene materials. Who gets
I
to
don't like the
decide
fact that
in
you mentioned.
South Carolina what sites are blocked and what sites are accessible and what constitutes obscenity and what constitutes pornography?
Yeah, I mean, it could be obscenity, could be anything at this point. You could just slap it on, WikiLeaks, Anonymous, or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
To I don't know. There would have to be a filtering system, and it doesn't seem like, as far as the discourse on this bill would be, that there's been much discussion or thought put to that. And this is Gins's Republican-backed bill, which is scheduled to
Yeah,
be, yeah,
just no surprise at this point.
in a Republican-controlled General Assembly in the Palmetto State.
Right.
And the National Party, the GOP, also had a very strong crusade against it in their platform this year. And it's just so. Of course, we're talking about freedom of speech. But we're also talking about interstate commerce here, because if you're asking a company to install something that is not required nationally, or any other state,
Right.
isn't that burden that should not be like? Isn't that
Well, that's actually, and that's I'm glad you started going that direction, Jules, because it's also one of the things we're getting a number of comments from people. We will be getting to your tweets on this because as you can tell, I'm really trying to not let my how infuriated I am by this notion sort of override the discussion, and I'm not quite succeeding. Um, but just in terms of, is this going to serve the public good to have a law on the books which generates funds when there are so many loopholes, there are so many unknowns, we have no idea who's going to be in charge of rating something on the internet as to what's acceptable to consume and what's going to be blocked under this system. And this is brought up by at Rena Chan using the PN Weekly hashtag. And I guess as much as most other kinds of porn blockage, this will affect mostly legal websites, but will have no effect on Tor sites or anything dark web related.
Mhm.
And that to me becomes, you are not actually serving the public good. You are not actually preventing abuse. You're actually empowering people to go darker, to either circumvent and in essence become lawbreakers by trying to circumvent this policy, or they're going to try and find loopholes for purchasing computers out of the state so that they don't have this stuff pre-installed. And if we're making the slippery slope argument, can't we also make the slippery slope argument that if you start installing crap on our computing devices that monitor what kind of content we can consume, that eventually that power will fall into the hands of people we don't want to have that kind of power over our computing devices. Maybe one day it's pornography, maybe the next day it's any type of dissent in speech, and that's deemed unhealthy or un-American. Isn't that the same argument? Can't we make the same argument about that kind of policy?
I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to my first text from Donald Trump.
I'm not, though. That's what's so frustrating. Okay, so folks, So folks, here's one of the reasons why I'm so incensed over this policy. I think it should be pretty clear by now that I'm on the bleeding heart side of the political spectrum. I'm very left leaning, but one of the greatest failings of the Democratic Party in particular and liberals in general has been this notion of thought crime, of trying to police content, of trying to censor speech. Every single time we speak up against that type of liberty, it does a huge disservice to what I feel is the liberal cause in trying to raise boats up for everybody and trying to raise up all people. From, gangster rap and hip hop in the 90s to video game violence, the liberals have had a terrible track record of trying to silence this type of content or try and mute this type of speech. Now, for conservatives, it seems to land a lot on sex. They don't seem to have the same problems with violence. But I find this to be just as despicable as what the liberals did with violent imagery, what conservatives are now trying to do in protecting us from our carnal desires. Whether or not you consume pornography or whether or not you consume violent or aggressive media, if you're age appropriate, if you're not giving this stuff to children, if you're not letting children consume this kind of stuff, you're doing your job as a parent, you're doing your job as a consumer, then there should be no government force standing in the way of what a law-abiding adult should be able to consume in the comfort of their own home. This is a liberty issue. This is not a conservative issue. This is not a liberal issue. This is a freedom issue. And I hope those of you who are motivated enough to potentially post about this kind of stuff or write comments on blogs or link to it on Facebook.
Write your legislator.
You will write your elected officials to say this is absolutely not the course we should be going. And this is absolutely not what we should be spending our time on, as we have very real problems to fix in this country. And trying to stop someone from watching porn and extorting $20 out of them for the privilege is not how we're going to make America great again.
Yeah. I really don't want to go down the partisan road, but I'll just make this branch here, and that this is securing power in ways that, partisan ways where you can control the party, because we've seen, the North Carolina gerrymandering, the rules change where the governor had to, is being neutered of his powers, not being able to change staff and all that stuff. Like, this is going on in several places, and by, this extent, lots of, the act of sex has been a big talking point, a big point for evangelicals, for the religious right, and by, enabling this to be discussed in their platform, in the National Party's platform, we see things like this act, like Utah's act, where porn is a public health hazard. That is, that it's that kind of platform that we get, these kinds of bills from, in this kind of discussion, where the problem, if you want to throw science off the table here, is that we should be probably be talking to our kids about having, being human, being sexually active, and being, responsible for what we do on the internet, in terms of, I don't know, maybe not making mean comments, bullying, and then being sexually depraved through a long sequence of things for yourself.
Well, and we've got a number of comments here. I do want to get to some of these tweets. Ed and Chamford Edges and Rena and Panzer have been dropping us some great comments. In Chamford Edges, in Singapore, we don't give an F about large porn websites. About 100 of them have been blocked. No payment needed, just VPN. This is because I've seen this brought up a number of times, like, oh, well, I'll just circumvent this. If this becomes more of an issue, though, like if more states start sort of latching on to this idea of content censorship, the problem I have is VPN is the practical solution. It gets you around the block, but in essence, it turns what was a normal free behavior into a crime. I don't smoke marijuana, but I don't feel that it should be a felony. I don't feel that you should go to prison for a super long period of time, have your life taken away from you, lose the ability to vote in a number of places because you had a certain quantity of marijuana on you. I feel that's a very important freedom issue, especially if we're talking about whether or not that really serves the public good. Again, it's about criminalizing behavior, and it becomes about creating a thought crime mentality. So yes, we can absolutely get around. I have no doubt that someone will install Linux on one of these South Carolina laptops and be like, "Hey, look, all the porn I can eat." It's that like the DMCA, the enforcement of that policy means that you have now technically broken the law, however silly or insignificant that law might be. Whatever the financial obligation to paying your dues to the government that you've wronged.
You know what I just thought of? I just thought of. So the bill applies to internet connected devices that, any computer, smartphone, tablet, whatever. I'm thinking that there's going to be a new market for hard drives full of porn.
Binders full of women.
Binders full of women. Yeah, like that. So in any case, beware, people.
Well, if it becomes the Underground Railroad of sharing smut, I don't know. I've got a couple little thumb drives and portable hard drives. I will happily
get ready.
I will happily submit to the cause. From Panzer Z, I like drinking coffee, which is an addictive chemical, meaning I am a drug cartel leader. #logic.
Good job.
But that's just it. Like there are certain religious aspects of our society that don't disagree with that sentiment, that any type of substance like that, which is mind altering to whatever degree, means that you're some sort of depraved individual.
Hey,
from Ed,
I deal with chemicals too. I deal with chemistry, bad chemistry, like water.
Oh, you got to watch out for the dihydrogen monoxide. I hear that stuff's brutal. From Ed Maudlin, most politicians are doing anything but watching out for that without benefits of donations. Yeah, this to me, the fact that they're conflating public, protecting the public with sex trafficking, that this is their slippery slope argument just feels like something out of Reefer Madness. It doesn't. It's one of those things we're all going to laugh at it, and no one's really going to take it seriously. And so it's for people who feel like, oh, well, maybe you shouldn't install crap on my computer to block my porn. That's like, number 53 on their list of things that they care about. But for people who really do believe that this is, like, oh, if we can block porn, it means it's going to make our society so much safer. It's like number 3 on their list of things that they care about. So they're much more apt to be for it. The people who are for it are much more apt to join in the discussion, however misguided that discussion might be, as opposed to the people who are against it. Because then there's also the notion of shaming that individual. You watch porn? You're sick. Like, it's not that I'm defending the consumption of porn. It's that I'm defending my right to do what I want with my technology and not have an outside force tell me what is acceptable to consume and what isn't, within, of course, the reasons of the law as it currently stands and the boundaries of good taste as I see fit as a grown-ass individual to police my own content. Thank you.
Yeah. Stand up for the adults inside of us. Oh wait, hey, Panzer C. They already sell USB drives with preloaded porn.
Oh, well, problem
It's
solved.
called flesh drives.
Oh, is that like the video service behind like a fleshlight or something like that? I have no idea what he's talking about. That's awesome.
It's coming. Well, it's coming out of adultdvd.com. So NSFW people.
I don't feel like I'll be linking to that in the show notes. But
man.
Because this conversation is above and beyond the scope of what we normally talk about here on Pocketnow.com, that sort of the political aspects of this, I'm going to keep coming back to the same part of the conversation where we've been talking about net neutrality, where we've been talking about broadband competition. This is another one of those aspects. I kind of feel like we keep getting beaten up politically. And so every single time we feel like we're exhausted, it's going to make it that much easier for someone with an agenda to sneak something like this by us. So this is the perfect, we need to remain vigilant. We need to remain a part of the conversation, and the geeks need to be the people that other people can turn to for some insight and for some balanced discussion on this stuff. And so I hope you guys will join the conversation
too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there you go.
So thank you all so much for the comments, for the discussion, and not just for agreeing with us, but also for really joining the discussion. I feel that's going to be important over the next couple of years. But folks, this show's over. Another episode of the Pocketnow Weekly has come and gone. The conversation continues, though, on Twitter, where you can find Jules as @PointJules, and I'm humbly @SomeGadgetGuy. Pocketnow is around the web on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, YouTube, and our home site, pocketnow.com. We're basically everywhere, and we know what smut you've been watching. Now, shows like this can't exist without your support, sharing the weekly with your friends who love mobile technology, and by dropping some reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever podcast reviews can be left. Once again, we want to thank this week's sponsor, Jamf Now. Definitely check out that business management productivity software. Manage your iOS devices for your business. They're helping us keep the lights on, but ultimately there wouldn't be a show if it weren't for our listeners and subscribers who have kept us on the air since 2012. The Pocketnow Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology. Oh, no, we're not going to be back next week. We're going to take a week off. No, we've got a week off. We'll be back in...
No, we aren't.
We're not taking a week off?
No, we're not.
I thought we were.
No, we aren't. No, we're just going to go on tour. We never take a week off. We're not going to do it next time. We're not going to do it. We'll decide whether or not we're back next week, probably next week. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and make sure you tune back in.